Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Hogan and Brown trade barbs in the governor's race. But are voters paying attention? The state of New Columbia? Why not the state of Western Maryland? Baltimore-based Sinclair Broadcasting is remaking the image of WGLA. And will there be a Beltway World Series between the Nats and the O's? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by education activist Cynthia Rubenstein. Former chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher. Republican National Committeewoman for D.C., Jill Homan. And political consultant Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. As they say, politics is a tough business. And since the start of the post-Labor Day political season, Democrat candidate Anthony Brown and his Republican opponent Larry Hogan have traded barbs and have run aggressive negative commercials against one another. Things got heated this past week when Hogan claimed that Brown was lying about his record and called for a criminal investigation into illegal campaign activities by the Brown campaign. Mark, the Brown campaign calls Hogan thin-skinned and suggests that voters support the Democratic ticket and that when a candidate focuses on a personal attack rather than the issues, it's a sign they're losing.
Well, I think one of the things about this campaign is Anthony Brown isn't running against Larry Hogan. He's running against somebody he imagines he's running. He's using quotes that basically have to do with other people, his father 30 years ago. He needs to address the issues of where Larry Hogan is rather than the kind of fantasy candidate that he thinks he's running against.
Cynthia, but both candidates have engaged in extensive negative campaigns. Do these ads work? Is anybody looking at them?
I don't think anybody's looking at them. I think negative campaigns are, still conventional wisdom for most candidates. I think in some cases they work. But I think in this particular election cycle, people are just not interested in either candidate very much. And I think come November 4th, I don't think any of these ads are going to draw great numbers of voters to the polls.
Susan, I wanted to ask you about this. The big issue that affects this race, of course, is the competency of Anthony Brown and the Maryland Health Exchange. Now, we are about to enter the signing up period for the Maryland Health Exchange. And many of the people who signed up last year are going to have to re-register all over again. And there's the possibility that there could be bad publicity. Will that have an effect on the lieutenant governor's campaign?
Well, I think that has been hashed and rehashed, and people didn't really think that was an issue in the primary.
Not if they're headlines.
400,000 people registered for insurance who didn't have insurance before. It has been redone. They're testing it in the beta system, right, left, and every way you can imagine, and I think it's going to be fine. But I think that in this campaign, it's hard to get much on Mr. Hogan because they were talking about his bus or whatever and the actual cost. If you look at Larry Hogan's website, there are some nice platitudes. We need to take back taxes and cut spending, but there isn't one thing on his agenda about a position on any single issue. And that's what the Brown is. Where is Larry Hogan? What does he stand for? And there's nothing there. I was on the website today.
Well, Jill, in most political campaigns, the party that is out of favor attacks the party that is in power. Mm-hmm. And so in this instance, the Democratic Party has been in control for decades. And really the strategy is to attack the weaknesses of the lieutenant governor and his predecessor. Mm-hmm. Isn't that what's happening here?
Well, I think what Larry Hogan is doing is drawing a contrast between where his positions are and where the Lieutenant Governor Brown's statements and where his positions are. Because the reality is, to your earlier point, what we're really looking at is a third term for Governor O'Malley. And I respectfully disagree. I don't think it's been hashed out. When Lieutenant Governor Brown was the point person for the health exchange, and its cost taxpayer dollars the order of magnitude of $200 million. You have unemployment's ticked up in the state. You have close to a dozen Fortune 500 companies who have left the state. And it draws a picture of competency and a question of competency. And I think when you look at Larry Hogan, who has a record of working on both sides of the aisle as appointment secretary, he had to get those appointments confirmed. And he also has a record of building a business and the highs and lows of that and making payroll. So he understands what the average voter, the average Marylander has to go through.
But Larry Hogan also got into trouble when he was the appointments chair because he tried to get rid of Democrats who were merit system employees. So, if you don't know what he's running for, how are voters going to run?
Susan, this is what I think is going to happen. And I think it's all going to focus on the healthcare system. And if the re-enrollment process goes smoothly, and the re-enrollment process is going to start about 3 weeks before Election Day, and if the headlines are bad, the lieutenant governor is going to be in trouble. And if the headlines are good, then Mr. Hogan, as much as people might want to see a change, doesn't have a snowball's chance in where to be elected.
And there we are.
Do you agree?
Well, I think actually the economy of Maryland is a dominant issue, and I think the lieutenant governor wants to talk about any other issue that he can drag up, rather than talk about the competitiveness
Have you
of
heard
this
him
state.
actually speak? He talks about one issue after another and what he stands for, and I've never heard Larry Hogan do that, nor can you go on his website and find
Susan,
anything.
Congratulations, you got the last word on this topic. We're going to go to our next topic. News this week was dominated in part by the referendum in Scotland to secede from Great Britain. The idea that citizens should have a right to self-determination was also in play locally, as the efforts to recognize D.C. statehood once again went to defeat in Congress. Jill, should D.C. be admitted as a state?
Well, I think we need to be clear about what has happened, and a U.S. Senator from Delaware held a hearing and speaking about legislation that he had introduced, and a hearing was held about 20 years ago on this issue. And so when folks talk about statehood, it's kind of packed into several different issues. There's statehood, there's voting rights, there's budget autonomy, and there's tax treatment for DC residents. For many in the movement to provide more rights to DC residents, a lot of folks are take a more realistic approach and pragmatic approach, and they want to focus on incremental change, such as budget autonomy, which Congressman Darrell Issa, who oversees the Oversight Committee, he supports. Unfortunately, for many in the DC rights movement, the incremental progress and going that tactic, they don't favor. What I think for a lot of people in DC support is budget autonomy, where one local dollar that is generated in the district is also controlled by the district budget. On the other hand, when you have two DC council members who have gone to prison, who happen to be Democrats, and you also have a largely Democratic-controlled legislature, it's hard to make the case for having budget autonomy. So I think overall it makes the case for having more and having at least one or two and more Republicans on the council who have the relationship with the Republican-led House and soon-to-be Republican-led Senate, so that they can.
That's great. We're running out of time though, because Susan, let's. This is all bare knuckle politics. They're never going to allow the District of Columbia in as a state as long as it's so democratically controlled, as Jill pointed out. So why don't we allow another state in that might be more conservative and Republican controlled, and allow Western Maryland counties to secede from Maryland, since they don't have a vote either in the United States
Well, there
House
are
of Congress.
those. That's never going to happen either. There is in every state in this nation. There's a group of people who probably like to do it. Like in northern Minnesota, the snowmobilers might like to do it. It ain't going to happen, Casey.
Why not? Why not, Susan? Why aren't we allowed self-determination? Why should the people?
And I bet you would move there in a heartbeat.
Why are the people in Western Maryland denied a right to vote, Susan?
They are voting. They vote and they vote and they just, this is a democratic state. There are those.
They got all those little precincts in Montgomery County that dominate the whole western part of the state.
What might happen? I mean, there are those who have suggested that other than the block of, I don't know, there is this center of the city.
Have you seen District 3? The way
the
nightmare that is District 3, the way it's drawn?
Let me finish. Now, if there
how
are those...
How can you justify this?
There is an option
as a good government person, how can you justify this?
Do you want to talk about the options here? You asked me a question. There are those in the discussion this last week who talked about the center of the city staying the federal city and then the rest of D.C. going into Maryland. And it was very interesting in the conversation. George Will was a part of it, and he made a comment about, does Maryland really want that? And I don't think Maryland does. I think for the foreseeable future, what did you say, a cold day and you know where? It isn't going to happen. And Maryland, Western Maryland is not going to have their own state. So let's go on to something that's, debatable.
Well, it's really fun to toss this around. But I mean, I grew up in the district, and I was delighted when I was finally able to vote for president. But I mean, the idea is strictly just bare knuckle politics. And until the people come up with a different way, D.C. doesn't have a snowball's chance.
And there we go again.
And there we go again, Susan. But I don't know why you're so against good government in the state of Maryland and allowing people the right to vote. Why you
well, it can't be quite that bad because, in Florida there are 3 districts that are so gerrymandered that they have to have new elections come the spring.
Susan, 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Well, it's 3 in Texas and 1 here.
When we come back from this short break, will Baltimore-based Sinclair Broadcasting slant the news coverage at local WJLA and News Channel 8? And who will Montgomery County baseball fans support if there's a Beltway World Series? Stay tuned.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back. Baltimore-based Sinclair Broadcasting completed its acquisition of local media stations WJLA and News Channel 8 in July. And since then has begun to remake and remodel the 2 stations' news coverage to be more like their Baltimore station, WBFF. Mark, the news director at WBLA TV, describes Sinclair as running a very locally focused station. Does that mean that these 2 stations will focus more on Maryland, less on Virginia, less on D.C., and more on Baltimore in their coverage? And won't that actually be a good thing for us in Montgomery County?
I don't know that they'll focus more on Baltimore, but clearly the News Channel 8, the local cable news channel, is very important. And in other jurisdictions, again, not to criticize where it is now, have been much more robust and more active as a source of news and information about politics and government in local areas. So Sinclair has a real opportunity to beef up News Channel 8, make it more effective, and certainly that will have impact as well on 7.
Well, I think the opportunity for coverage of Maryland issues is heightened because of their additional station in Baltimore, because they can use those news resources for reporting here. I mean, there is a dearth of news about Maryland politics on local television. Jill, there's also the suggestion, however, in the Washington Post that the editorial content of these 2 stations may be more conservative and a threat to free speech. But that was rather speculative, and is it a concern for viewers?
Well, I don't think so. I think what you have is Sinclair Broadcasting. You know, they own 164 stations. It includes Fox, CBS, NBC, ABC stations. And this, in my view, is another portfolio station. They're a publicly traded company, got approval from the Justice Department. And, you know, as with many publicly held companies, they're also responsible to their shareholders, and as well as you know, the advertisers who are generating revenue. So I think this is a success story for a Hunt Valley, Maryland company, and I'm excited to see how they can better use the resources of this larger corporation to support and get the news out for greater DC and Montgomery County.
You know what I found shocking about the article in the Washington Post was that it was all very thin-based speculation and thin gruel that they wrote a very lengthy story and article about, speculating that this was going to be some kind of conservative-dominated, editorialized station.
Well, if you look at the Minneapolis station that they own, there was a sharp curve to the right when they took over that station. And it was interesting, in that article, it did say that the owners said to the news people that the news group is going to work for advertising. That to me is a bit problematic. And I also think that if they want to survive in the DC market, and I go back to something Mike Barnes said a long, long time ago. He said, in Montgomery County, you're talking to people who make the policy. And, you know, so the people in this area, whether it's DC, Maryland, or Virginia, they have a bigger interest in the national news than they often do on the local news. So if WJLA walks away from that, they're going to have less viewership, no matter what bent they take.
Susan, I don't know where you get that idea.
What?
If based on their Baltimore track record that they are more locally focused, that this is going to be a problem. Mark.
I was going to point out, though, I mean, there is a perception that Sinclair is more conservative, but it's a little disingenuous to read the Washington Post complain of, which is fairly liberal in its editorial policy, complaining about
wasn't an editorial.
Another voice coming into the Washington marketplace.
But even, you know what? But if you listen to Fox News, and Fox News has the local one, I listen to that often at 10 o'clock because I prefer watching Jon Stewart a little later. And they don't have that same approach. But what the Post did allude to is that when they were covering like something in Myrtle Beach, they had to bring into some sort of marketing package to sell Myrtle Beach.
The advertising angle is what bothers me. You know,
if it plays out.
Well, it's
if
already
it plays out,
there's
that's to be watched, because that's not news.
It's only been
advertising
about
posing
3
as
weeks
news.
or 4 weeks. So there is concern if indeed this is going to happen, but focus locally to a point, because a lot of people prefer national.
But what's wrong if there is a more conservative bent, Susan?
That's
what's
fine.
Wrong with that?
Viewers can take a walk and they can watch something else, can't they?
Certainly can. And we look at Fox's ratings and MSNBC's ratings and make a determination and see how that plays out in Washington.
I watch Fox News and MSNBC. Because I want to, I watch Fox for opposition research, and because it's very entertaining in its own way to me.
It does give you a chuckle.
All right, we're going to wrap this bad boy up because this was a rather thin story. I just couldn't believe the Washington Post spent 3 pages on speculative, nonsense. But there is something that's very real out there, and that's the growing likelihood that there could be a World Series featuring the Baltimore Orioles and the Washington Nationals. And this seemed more inevitable as both teams, each with the best win-loss record for their respective leagues, clinched their division pennant win on the same night. Cynthia, how great would it be to have a Beltway World Series?
I've been waiting 2 years for this moment to come again. And I think it would be fantastic if we had a Beltway series. Although I think Montgomery County will be split. I'm an inside the Beltwayer, so I'm a Nats fan. I respect my friendly adversary Orioles fans if it comes to pass. I think it would be fantastic for the Washington region.
Susan, since Minnesota Twins won't be in the series,
You were going to say call them carpetbagging.
well, they were carpetbaggers. They left.
Yep.
They left in 1961 to go become the Minnesota Twins, the Washington Senators. My 10-year-old heart was broken
Am I?
when they left Griffith Stadium. But who are you going to support? That's the big question.
I am outside the Beltway. I am a Marylander, and most important, because of my darling Minnesota Twins, I am an American League fan all the way, and I will cheer on the Orioles as best I can. Not when they play the Twins, but every other, I will cheer for them.
So, Jill, I want to give you an opportunity
Okay.
to say who you might be supporting this time, if there's any question.
It is. I'm gonna have to think about it for a little bit. So
Hold that bad boy
I know.
up.
I'm very excited. I think it would be terrific to have some people call it a Parkway or a Beltway series. I call it maybe a traffic series, but with my Nationals is who
series.
I'm
With the
rooting for.
the gridlock series.
you know what-
That's what it would be.
Do you know
That would
what's
be a
sad
great
about
name.
this, though, is beyond a very small area, I'm not certain that people in Wyoming or California or Texas are going to give a darn about a series that's just the Beltway. That could be bad for ratings.
Oh,
You don't know-
I like Mark's name, Gridlock
I
Series.
got to tell you, I think it would
That's
spark
descriptive.
tremendous interest, partially because of the unique differences between the teams. The Orioles are a power team that relies on the long ball, and they've got some terrific starting pitching. Not much of a reliever base, but they've got terrific starting pitching. And you wonder, with both teams, how they've done so well.
Washington
this
has
year.
terrific starting pitchers.
Oh, no,
They've
no,
got
I'm
five
not, I'm not-
tremendous
I'm not taking
pitchers.
But Washington's offense is based more on singles, pushing a run across, more traditional National League type baseball than
Home runs in Baltimore.
Yeah, the big bats. And unfortunately for the Nationals, when they played the Orioles this year in interleague games, they didn't do so well. So it's going to be a terrific, and I think that's going to be fascinating.
But I look at the pattern that they had with the Braves, and earlier in the season they had a lot of trouble with the Braves. But recently they came back into their own. We're also getting back Zimmerman, and when he gets back on the team, we are going to have a wealth of hot bats.
So, Mark, you've been rather quiet. Any other
I've
thoughts?
just moved to, for at least a temporary basis, outside the Beltway. So still the Nationals. And actually, Facebook's done a great map where they figure out where the fan patterns are. And from what I've seen from that, most of Montgomery County is Nationals.
Well, then I'm an odd.
You're an odd, well, you said it yourself.
Well, we'll leave
Go
it. We're going to
Orioles!
leave it at that. Stay tuned for parting shots.
Oops. Yeah, sure. Let's go. Moms everywhere are finding ways to keep kids active and healthy.
Works every time.
Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov.
And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Cynthia Rubenstein.
I read the paper the other day, and the MacArthur Genius Grants were awarded. And one of the awardees is Jason Laurie, who graduated from Montgomery Blair High School in 1996, is a Harvard mathematics professor working on algebraic geometry stuff. My dream,
That's the technical term.
stuff. My dream is that someday a former student in one of my Passion for Learning programs will win a MacArthur Genius Grant as well.
Thank you, Cynthia. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
And I hope they share some of that money with you. I'd like to do a little shout out to Common Cause of Maryland, which has done a what they're calling a gerrymander meander. They've set up a walkathon through the 200 miles of the district that takes place. If you go from one end to one, it's just a mess. And I think this is a great and creative way of bringing attention to what is argued to be one of the worst gerrymandered, worst designed districts in America.
And what district is that?
That is District 3.
Thank
That's
you.
the Sarbanes district.
Mark? Jill Homan, your party shot.
Well, reaching a little bit outside of Montgomery County, wanted to give a shout out to Annapolis Mayor Mike Pantelides. We interviewed him with City GOP, and he's a young rising star in the party, and I think is going to be someone to watch in the years to come, and doing a lot in Annapolis to reach across both sides of the aisle. So
Great, thank you, Jill. Susan Heltemes, your party shot.
On a light note, like Cynthia, I want to give kudos to a teacher in Tacoma Park, Sarah Manchester. I know Sarah's parents. Her father is a U of Minnesota alum, but they're active in the Silver Spring area. And Sarah won $1 million on television this week. So, what?
Wheel of Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune. I totally forgot that part. Wheel of Fortune. So congratulations, and also a shout out to Brian Goldstein. Thank you for all you do to make Montgomery County a better place.
Thank you, Susan. Now, you know, we all think we sit on this panel and we all know each other very well. But I had the rare opportunity of spending some time with Sam Statlin, who's a regular panelist on this show. And I thought I'd know all about his business, his family, his kids. What I didn't know, and what I learned to my great delight, was that Sam had been a professional official for the National Football League, and in fact was recognized as one of the top 52 officials that changed and impacted his career. So I want to give a big shout out to Sam, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I want to thank the viewers for being here and tuning in to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show for 21 this week. I'm Casey Aiken, and remember, you can like us on Facebook, you can follow us on Twitter, and you can watch us on YouTube. Stay tuned. See you later.